I sat here for a while thinking about how I wanted to make this intro funny, right? Because like, how do you portray white and green and blue armor in the way up in a way that's comical? So I got something.
You think you gotta have the best gear, brother? Well, let me tell you something, brother. If you just get the good tactics, you'll be able to kick anybody's ass, brother.
Voice. There's a small section of the community that tends to get left out, and that is the new light players. I wanted to submit myself to the burdens of that new light experience, and I wanted to do it so that I could prove to everybody who is well established as a player, they've got the gear mostly of what they're looking for, to prove a point that you don't absolutely have to have the best gear in order to do well. In fact, I would be willing to say that if you're locked into the mindset that you have to have the best God roll gear, or you're blaming other players for your performance being poor, yeah, you've got a lot of stuff to learn. Today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about that new light experience. I've taken all of my gear and stripped it away, started from white gear in every single game, worked my way up the tier list until we got to legendary and exotic gear. The goal of this video is not only to show some new light players what some stuff you can be looking for, but I also want to give some advice for players who are veterans in order to better improve your game when you strip away some of the variables. Let's talk about the Kvastov. The Kvastov is now the first weapon that you get whenever you are a new light player. Would you believe me if I told you that the Kvastov is not the worst weapon that you can get? I would be willing to say that some of the other exotic gear is worse than the Kvastov, which is saying something, which is lesson number 1. Archetype is so important to the Crucible. Often whenever we engage in Crucible, we are so hyper-focused on perks and rolls and all this other stuff, but legitimately at the end of the day, if you have an archetype that is good in the game, you're going to do fine. 600 autos aren't the best, but they're pretty damn good. 0.8 second TTK. This one has some of the worst range in the game. This Kvastov has like the range of an SMG, but even despite that, it still does a pretty good job. Aim assist feels okay on this. The handling is, it's not great, but that TTK and the ranges at which you can engage things is perfect for what you're looking for at about 15 to like 20 meters with my 6-meter shotgun. If you're wondering what subclass I'm running bottom tree Nova, i.e. Warlock. This is something that's going to go away a little bit once we get the new Void 3.0 stuff, but nevertheless, it is good to note that Bungie will be starting off new light players with Void subclasses exclusively. So starting with a good subclass is basically just a force multiplier for everything you're doing. Having a good grenade and a solid melee and a good understanding of your abilities will help you tremendously. Even despite my friends running higher tier gear, legendary gear or higher, I still ended up top fragging. This was just a game out of the blue. This wasn't something I had to do multiple times in order to make sure I got the top frag for the YouTube content. This all happened live on stream. If you're smart, you can absolutely top frag consistently with good use of cover. Let's jump into green gear. As a quick aside, if you would like to make happiness chemicals inside of my brain, I highly suggest you hit that subscribe button. It helps us keep this whole boat afloat, and it lets me know that this is the type of content you're looking for. With green gear, you get slightly better stats and very small adjustments to your individual stats, like maybe a different reticle or something. You're still missing some of the core things that we've come to know and love as the generic Destiny experience. One thing that's interesting to note here, I think Bungie matches people according to their gear tier. My overall ELO, which is like a skill rating that's behind the scenes, is relatively high, but I can tell you that these opponents feel easier to kill. I don't know if it's just purely placebo or if because I'm having to hyper focus on like the minute micro game of being good at just individual shots that it felt easier, but I'm telling you this as a player who has spent 80% of 2,000 hours in the Crucible. It's interesting. It's very, very odd. I decided with this particular game to stick with what we were using, which is a 600 auto and a shotgun. The difference between white and green gear is basically negligible. The big thing that was hurting above absolutely everything else was a lack of weapon handling as well as recovery. Recovery is the single most important stat for Crucible above absolutely everything else. If you want to instantly make your build better, have 100 recovery. The map we got happened to be relatively perfect for this as well. Medium to close range worked beautifully for this. And to the second point, special weapons. Using your special ammo smart will net you more overall success in the Crucible. Knowing when to switch between your weapons, knowing when to look at your radar and say, hey, that target's getting a little closer to me, I should just switch over to my shotgun and then use my movement abilities to close that gap if I need to, is so damn helpful. The gameplay pretty much speaks for itself. It was fine, everything functioned exactly the way I was hoping it would, and again, we ended up coming out basically on top. For blue gear, I decided to switch it up. I went away from Void Warlock and decided to go into Void Hunter. This time I'm running Top Tree Hunter, which is dodging to grant invisibility, the Snare Bomb, Smoke Bomb, which will ping enemies' radar, and a Gambler's Dodge on triple jump. Another highly overlooked archetype of weapon is the 540 pulses, or the rapid fire pulses. You don't have to have an adaptive 140 hand cannon in order to do well. Anything that competes in a similar slot, at least for right now, this is why I'll always champion that the current weapon meta is one of the best weapon metas we've seen. You're probably going to do okay. Example, this 540 pulse. Is it the best? Absolutely not. It's a blue pulse rifle that has quick draw, which did actually help out a lot. We talked about handling in the last section, but its consistency in range and TTK made this excellently handle any situation I was in. I decided to slightly shift away from a close range secondary weapon and went for a rapid fire fusion, which is, I know, still pretty close range, but it gives us a little bit more variety in how we're engaging targets. As long as you aren't overcommitting to fights and generally taking fights that are catching people off guard, you'll be okay. The big takeaway from here is to make sure that you're always positioning yourself in such a way that you either have space to run away at your back or teammates at your back with some solid piece of cover in front of you. Pulse rifles can hit targets from ranges that are slightly further than like something like a hand cannon, or in our case previously an auto rifle, so I was able to tickle targets from a distance. Manipulating cover and sightlines is critical in order to secure a higher KD. I didn't quite top frag in this one, but the game decided to go with the KD rather than the overall kills. I did end up getting overall higher kills than my the person who was above me. Most of the time I ended up losing, not because I felt the other person just had superior firepower, but because I was just playing poorly. I was taking fights that I really shouldn't be. I was getting too close to targets who had something like a shotgun, or taking a fight when I really didn't have any cover. For our last build, this one was actually chosen by the chat. Basically, I was told to take a hand cannon and a Lord of Wolves, so I decided to take this Dire Promise, which has snapshot and rangefinder. Really feels good in the hand. The Dire Promise is such a great weapon. Talking about archetypes again, you don't have to have the Eyasluna in order to be good. Yes, the Eyasluna is above everything else slightly, but realistically, for most, maybe like 90% of engagements, you're going to find plenty of success if you find a decently rolled similar archetype with okay stats and good perks. The Lord of Wolves is so super slept on. I'm honestly surprised we don't see more of it generally in the game, because it competes directly with the very fusion heavy gameplay that we have right now. Fusion rifles are incredibly dominant right now. Lord of Wolves competes with slightly less range, but more range than your generic shotguns. This allows you to burn down targets with ease. And as for the subclass, a subclass that I have talked about previously as being really slept on is Middle Tree Well of Radiance. Well of Radiance, just its passive, ignoring its super entirely, is so good at cheesing out 1v1s. A quick grenade for healing can give you not only full health back, but an overshield as well, meaning if your opponent takes some damage and then tries to commit to finish out the fight, and if you've got that healing down, you're pretty much slotted to win 9 times out of 10. I was able to BS my way out of so many kills because of smart use of my abilities. Destiny, at the end of the day, is an ability shooter game. As much as Bungie has toned down overall ability usage, it's not gonna go away. It is part of the game. It's what makes Destiny so much fun, I feel. Despite us taking more meta stuff into this game with higher tier gear overall, we still ended up performing about the same as we were with our green and white gear, which just goes to show that at the end of the day, it comes down to the strength of your knowledge of tactics, engagements, and usage for cover, abilities, and overall game sense and awareness. It comes down to being able to critically evaluate what you're doing, to be able to look at your performance and say, what am I doing wrong? Not just, I'm not shooting the person well, because that will come with time, but trying to stack the deck in your favor before the fight even begins, taking a position of cover so that your opponent has to hit a much harder shot compared to what you're having to take, trying to take every advantage and blow it up to be an even bigger advantage. I hope this helped even in the slightest. Make sure you subscribe if you are new to the channel. Bless your faces, and deuces.
Zone C captured. Zone advantage is yours. I need a hunter like you with the red jacks.